show about work, a very particular magical kind of work. We're going to explore the mystery behind the magic of the etheric and energetic realms through the people who practice these healing arts. How do they show their work, do their jobs, and explore the unseen? Today we have Rachel Quinlan with us. Thank you, Rachel, for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, such a pleasure. Rachel is a Reiki master and a tarot reader. She is a healer using a combination of tarot, Reiki, shamanic journey, and sound healing. Did I get it all?
Yeah, most of it.
So describe your work for us.
You know, I think it's so funny when, as Americans, basically, we're sort of mutts, right? Most of us aren't lucky enough to come from a lineage of healers,
right.
From long lines of things in this or that. And so I think growing up as Americans, we're always sort of grasping at something, trying to figure out what feels like ours, what can we learn about that feels like it resonates in our DNA and our blood. And so ever since I was a little kid, I was kind of a searcher, always looking for something. And for me, I consider myself a student of all kinds of magical modalities. And I've been kind of grabbing onto things that feel right and sort of mixing them into that melting pot that's so American for all of us, and turning them into something that's a little bit my own. So
right.
I call myself a tarot reader. I start with tarot with a lot of my clients. I think about it as like diagnostic work that a doctor would do, listening
right.
like with a stethoscope. And then usually I'll move people onto the table. I'll do a combination of Reiki, energy work, and then we go into those other spaces, those spaces that I call beyond the veil.
Right.
And we use that with sound. We use repetitive beats, usually rattles and drums, to kind of get people into those magical spaces. It changes their brain waves. It changes how they're receptive to information. And that's why I really like to wake people up to their magic, to take them beyond there, show them what exists inside of themselves, and together we explore that. And
right.
within those realms, there's a number of healing opportunities for discovery, self-reflection, knowledge, and getting in touch with their own magic.
For you as well, while you're working on them, this is about kind of you and your work. When you're doing your work, are you also on that trip?
I absolutely am on that trip. And what's beautiful and what I really love about it is that I'll get pieces of information, my clients will get pieces of information,
right.
and then it's beautiful to see where they overlap, what things come in for me that I can fill in for them and vice versa. And
right.
There are things always on the other side that kind of surprise me too.
Like what?
Oh my goodness. One time I was working with a client and we were kind of in this Kiva type space and we were working, and suddenly this huge animal just came into the room, and I'm going, you know, your intellect is always sort of warring with your intuition, and so this huge like reindeer creature just nuzzles me from the back, and I'm going, reindeer? That can't
right.
be right. Reindeer, no. So I tell my client, well, there's this very large animal, a mammal with big horns, because I don't want to say there's a reindeer in the room with us. And he goes, oh, that's my reindeer. And I'm going, oh, okay. So trust your intuition.
Wow. And you could when you say you could see it, do you see that with your eyes? Do you see that in your mind?
You know, it depends on the client.
Right.
And it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'll just get the sense, like reindeer, like it just sort of comes in.
Just a knowing.
Like this fully formed thing. Sometimes it's like clues, like I'll see horns, I'll hear something sniffing and pawing at the earth. So it sort of just depends on the client, kind of our energetic connection and my mood that day.
Okay. That sounds like fun.
It is fun. It's you know, sometimes you have to question your own sanity, but that's part of the process. Is
right.
allowing yourself to go a little bit crazy and let go of the things that you were tethered to in order to kind of experience that luminous, liminal state.
Is that available all the time?
Absolutely, it's available all the time. I'm such a big fan of talking about liminal states, these
right.
places of the in-between, because to me that's where magic lives. So
right.
when you get up at sunrise and you see the sun, everyone feels magic when the sun is rising.
Yeah.
That state is always available to us, but it's also when you pass through a yellow light when you're driving and you get that shiver, that feeling, that's
like,
a liminal space.
Like,
oh shit, yeah.
I hope I don't get a ticket, yeah.
Exactly, but it's also that feeling of like,
right.
I just passed through this between state. So I think we can always access it if we let ourselves pay attention.
Is there something to be said for, are you into rituals as a way of kind of entering these spaces?
Absolutely. I think, especially for beginners, ritual is
Right.
something really beautiful. I'm not a very detail-oriented person. I don't like following rules. So when I was beginning my practice, I bucked against ritual.
Yeah,
I thought,
I can
this is
understand.
kind of fuddy-duddy. I grew up Catholic, stand up, sit down,
Right.
kneel, sing, don't sing. And I didn't want any part of that. But as I deepen my own practice, I recognize that ritual is a signal to ourselves, to our higher selves, that we're entering into something that's out of the ordinary. We're stepping into non-ordinary reality. And everything that we do in a ritual, whether it's lighting incense, saying a prayer, taking a breath, it signals to us that we're ready and willing to step into that state that's the otherness. Otherness with a capital O, I would say.
What's a ritual you do?
Oh my goodness. Well, it depends on what I'm doing, but
Yeah, I guess for work.
for work. Okay,
Right.
so when I'm about to see clients in the morning, I come in and I set my space. So what
Right.
setting space means is I'll get a feel for the energy in the room. I'll see if there's anything stagnant, if it's in the corners, if it's under chairs, and I'll clear it out. I'll clear it out with clapping, with snapping, with smoke, anything to kind of move the energy out.
Right.
So I'm kind of doing a little bit of energetic cleanup.
And you're feeling it, right? When
You can
go
feel
like
it.
that.
You can feel the stagnation. You can feel kind of what's moving around. And I used to hear people talk about feeling energy, and I was like,
Right.
I don't know about that.
That's so airy-fairy.
It is.
Yeah.
It does sound kind of airy-fairy.
Yeah.
Luckily, I grew up with a family that was really open to that. So we played with energy when I was young. We would play with balls of energy. And once I got a little bit more sensitive to it, it's just like touching a shirt. You can feel something laying over the skin. Like I can tell what's different than cloth and skin. So I clear out the space, and then I begin by setting space. So when I was talking about liminality, what I like to do is position myself at the center of where I'm working. So that means I start by calling in corners. I call in energies from the north, from the east, from the south, from the west. I call in helping energy from below and from above, and it kind of creates this bubble. And that's putting me in my liminal space. I call on my guides, people that are protecting me, and my higher self. And that really sets a beautiful and magical space. I have a little prayer that I say before I talk to my clients, just asking that I can tell them things in the way that they need to hear it, with my highest possible integrity, because our ego gets in the way. My ego has tons of opinions that it wants to tell clients, and I have to tell it this isn't, they're not paying you to listen to your ego, they're paying to listen to the messages that are coming through me. So those are the rituals that I do at the beginning with my clients, and then at the end of the day, like clockwork, I take a salt foot bath. And that kind of washes everything away.
Oh, really?
It cleans out the energetic residue of the day. I can take pieces of my clients home with them. They don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night with like extra tidbits. And I get a little bit antsy if I don't take my salt foot bath. So that's a ritual that I am very adamant about.
And maybe we should all be doing that.
I think if there were foot bath stations on every corner instead of
Yeah.
tanning salons, the world would be a better place.
They'd look better too.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I think rituals are important. There are daily rituals, monthly rituals.
Rituals say when you enter into nature or water. Do you do rituals for that?
That's a good question. I can't say that I have rituals when I enter into nature, but I love the idea that with nature is so dynamic. When you talk about entering into water,
Right.
it's sort of this co-creative space where sometimes nature tells you what it needs, what it wants. Sometimes I'll go into a space and I'll feel like some energy needs to be cleared or something needs to be moved around, and but mostly nature kind of does what it wants, and and I let nature kind of enact its ritual on me, I guess.
That's an interesting idea, nature doing rituals. What are talismans?
What are talismans? I love that question. Talismans to me are objects that hold power. They
Inherently, or are you imbuing them with power? or we imbuing
That's a
them
good
with
question. I think it's a little bit of both. I had a talisman. I have a little labradorite stone that was given to me by a good friend, and I rub it for luck. I rub it for grounding. I think talismans, they originate with their own inherent magic. We have our lucky rabbit's foot.
Right.
We have railroad spikes that we use. We collect some piece of something. I'm looking around like I might find a talisman on the ground.
Dust. That dust is so magical.
Yes,
over there.
it is. But we collect things that we feel that we're drawn to. So I think there is an inherent bit of magic that it gives to us. And then the more we carry talismans, the more we use them, the more we charge them with our intent and our energy. It's sort of a reciprocal nature, like much like an altar. It's sort of like an energetic savings account. We put our energy into it, and when we need it, we can draw it back.
How would you need a talisman?
Well, I don't know if anyone necessarily needs a talisman, but if they wanted a talisman,
then how would you use your talisman?
So I have different ones because I'm a little pack rat and I want my talisman for this and for that. But especially if you need grounding, for me, because I spend so much of my time kind of up here in these worlds, a lot of the talismans I use are to ground me and bring me back into my body. Other people may feel that they're so earthbound that they want a talisman that helps them elevate. So they might use something a little bit different. We have talismans for protection. My grandmother gave me a medal of St. Christopher when I was young, and I use that as a talisman of protection. So I think there's lots of cultures that bring in talismans and
right, they just don't call it that.
Exactly. Or something that you would hang above your door, that you look and you touch when you pass through it every day.
So these objects actually do have the power we've imbued them with.
Absolutely. And I think when I think about all of the magic that I'm lucky enough to do, everything is an exchange of energy.
Yeah.
Everything is always moving. So there are talismans that are inherent with power, but it's up to us to kind of keep them alive, and we feed them with our own power.
Do you feel that magic, occultism, magic with a K, occultism, tarot, do you feel they're spiritual?
I think that's exactly what they are. I think they're absolutely spiritual.
Why?
Well, when we look at the occult, when we look at tarot, magic with a K, it's a path of self-understanding, of self-knowledge. And when I say self, it's that capital S, higher self.
Right.
And sure, you can use occultism to feed your ego. If you look at Aleister Crowley or Anton LaVey, it's these men using magic to kind of puff up their ego. So I think that it can have that. It's a tool like anything else. But for the most part, I think tarot and the study of the occult is a knowledge-based system to help us understand our place in the universe and how we kind of fit within everything else.
That's a good point. We're trying to think how, because most of us don't practice these modalities, right? These magical modalities. And perhaps we're the poorer for it, We're lacking.
I think there's spiritualism to be found in so many things.
Oh,
and, And the occult is one method. You could probably be a mountain climber and experience divinity.
Oh, right.
In any form, but I think it's just one little slice of this
massive pie,
exactly.
Right?
Yes.
You do tarot, as we know. What's in a tarot deck for you? Is there something special about particular decks, and how do you make a deck your own?
Okay.
The three-parter.
Yeah. So
what's in a tarot deck for you?
What's in a tarot deck for me? I have always been drawn to signs and symbols. And I love the idea that within the deck of the tarot, there are these universal signs and symbols that we can all identify with. From a Jungian perspective, there are these archetypes that we can all see ourselves in. If we look at the Fool in the card, there's a man standing at the edge of a cliff and he's looking over it, and we can all resonate with that sense of the Fool. When we see the Queen, the Empress, we can see that she's abundant, that she's fertile, that she's magical and creative, and we can tap into that without words. I think our unconscious operates in signs and symbols. It doesn't operate in language, similar to how hypnotism would work, similar how other energy modalities work in energy work. So with the tarot, we're using pictures, we're using signs and symbols to stir our unconscious. When I work with my clients, I could sit there and say, look, you have lousy taste in men, you need to work on this, and your love life's never going to change unless you can figure this out. But they're not going to be receptive to that. I mean, some might. But if I can say, okay, look at this Knight of Cups. This Knight of Cups, he's a Don Juan. He will woo anybody. And it's very easy to fall in love with a Don Juan because this is what the Knight of Cups is like. And then my client can go, oh, I'm really attracted to men that are like that.
Right.
Okay, well, the thing you know about the Knight of Cups is see the horse he's walking. He's going to be walking out the picture as soon as he walks in. Oh. And I'm not speaking to my clients' consciousness, I'm speaking to her unconscious. I'm speaking below these levels. And as we can unite ourselves with these pictures, we can stir up something that lasts, in my opinion, a little bit longer than just a conversation.
Told,
yes.
You have the worst taste in men, you make the worst decisions. Right. But she's not going to know what, the Knight of Cups is. That's not going to...
Her conscious mind might not know.
She needs an interpreter.
I think so, but I also sometimes I love to just show people the cards, and sometimes they'll have their own opinions. I was working with a woman who was going through a terrible breakup, and I pulled the Death card, and the deck I was working with at the time didn't have the names on it, so she didn't see that it was called Death. And she was going through what we've all, should I stay, should I go? And she said, look at that victorious warrior on top of this horse, and he's just crossing anything that comes in his path and trampling it, and nothing is going to stop him. And that's what I need to harness, that warrior energy. Well, it's the card of death, but also she needed to let that relationship die.
Right.
She needed to walk over some of these things that felt vulnerable for her to experience the other side of it. So while she didn't know this was the card of death, she was pulling from that energy of saying, I need to let this die, and I need to go boldly into this sort of death of my life.
Do you use these cards for your own life?
I do. I have an interesting relationship with the tarot personally because I'm so close to the cards that I think sometimes my ego gets in the way and wants to have its own opinions, and I can spin the reading any way I want it to.
You know too much.
I know too much.
The curse of the expert.
But I have some decks of cards where the artists have taken liberties with the meanings and the interpretations. And I love going to those decks because it kind of takes me outside of that element, outside of sort of
the traditional decks that have the lineage going back.
And for me, that kind of helps me get a little bit more out of my head and into my own intuition.
And are they, I've heard from, I don't know if this is, Tarot's a different divination tool, right? But I know from psychics that they really can't read themselves.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult. It's hard for me to read for people that I'm very close to because I'm very invested in their outcome. Yeah. And I really want to tell them what they want to hear, and that's not in service to them.
No. Yeah, and nor accurate, right?
Certainly, yep.
So I guess you kind of answered, is there something special about particular decks? You like the ones that are very traditional and also that are kind of out there.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with traditional decks because they look like a bunch of old white rich people, which is what they are. And with my clientele, it can be difficult to identify with that. So when I said before we can all identify, we can identify with the energy of that card. But to see a bunch of old white people in a deck, it can feel a little bit alienating. So I'm constantly in search of decks that have a little bit more representation, that are a little bit more intersectional. There's some great ones out right now. We're experiencing a renaissance in tarot cards. So I think anyone can find a deck that really speaks to them. And
like a Doreen Virtue.
Like a Doreen Virtue, yes.
Just kidding. And how do you make a deck your own? I'm assuming you have a ritual behind that.
Yes, and
is there kind of a standard way of making a deck one's own? Is that even necessary?
I think what's very interesting is that I've been lucky enough to teach a lot of students the tarot, and the thing I find the most is that they give more power to the tarot than it necessarily has.
Right.
It's a tool. It's images on paper. So people will say things like, oh, I think my deck is mad at me because I didn't store it in the right way. So I think, first of all, it's important to remember that the tarot is a tool, just like anything else. But as a tool, we want to treat it with reverence and respect because we're asking a lot of these things.
Right.
So we want to enter into a relationship that is, to anthropomorphize the deck, which I tend to, enter into a relationship that's mutually beneficial.
Right.
So when I get a deck, if it's a used deck, I might cleanse it. I might bury it in salt. I might cleanse it with smoke medicine. But what I love to do when I first get a deck is I just like to make it my friend. I'll put it in a bag. I'll carry it around in my purse. I might sleep with it next to my bed or under my pillow and just get to know it. I'll shuffle it absent-mindedly and let my energy imbue into the cards. And I think just spending time with your deck will let it become your own.
I hadn't thought to do that.
It's interesting, just because the more you work with it, the more familiar it feels. Then the deck will start talking back to you as you're shuffling. You'll feel a tingle, you'll feel something pop. Whatever the language that you have with your deck,
Right.
it will let you know.
Kind of teach you how to read it.
Yes, I have one deck, and I probably shouldn't have to apologize for the airy-fairiness of my
Right.
comments, but
No.
I have one deck that loves to be sprayed with rose water.
Right.
And so when it feels heavy or sprayed or like bogged down, I'll spray it with rose water. Other decks don't seem to care one way or the other about rose water.
That's interesting.
So I think, maybe depending on the artist and the cards, and they each sort of have their own proclivities.
You mentioned, and this is interesting to me because sometimes I feel that we perhaps give things like astrology or tarot decks like too much weight, right? Tarot started as playing cards and things like that. And you mentioned that you have students who, my deck is mad at me, and just give it a little bit too much weight. Do you think that some of us, we have a tendency to get a little fussy about these things? Like, for instance, Mercury retrograde. Does Mercury retrograde actually exist, or have we all imbued it with so much power that electronics and everything? I mean, it's very common. You hear it when I travel in LA or New York. It seems like everyone's like, oh, Mercury retrograde. And
I saw a thing the other day that said Mercury's out of retrograde, now everything is your own fault again. And I think the answer is both. Yes, Mercury retrograde exists.
Yeah.
Yes, we have imbued it with way too much power.
Right.
Someone said to me the other day, oh my gosh, you're so brave to be traveling during Mercury retrograde. And I went, gotta live your life, man. And I think the moon does have influence on us. I think the planets do have influence on us. But ultimately, we are our own biggest proponent of what we say and what we do.
Right.
And even when I do readings for people and they get so nervous of what is the outcome going to be, what's going to happen, and I like to say, here in Denver, we live near the mountains, and when we drive into the mountains, we see a sign that says, beware of falling rocks.
Right.
If the tarot reading says beware of falling rocks, it doesn't mean that a rock is going to hit you and smash your car.
Yeah.
It just means beware that this is the path that you're going down.
Right.
This is a likely outcome. So it's not to give fear to anybody. It's to give them an opportunity to look at their situation, look at the paths they're traveling, and say, okay, do I want to continue down this path? Do I want this to be part of what I'm doing with my life?
It almost feels like they're giving, or we're giving, too much power away.
I totally agree.
Yeah, it's one reason that I find psychic readings a little tricky, because then you think, okay, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's set. So, since we talk a lot about healing, how do you heal? Your work is healing for others, but how do you?
I would answer that I don't heal.
You don't?
No. I cannot heal anyone who doesn't want to be healed. What I like to say is that I facilitate a space for people to heal themselves. If someone doesn't want to get better, as we all know, they're not going to get better. We could want the world for somebody, and they're not going to change unless they have that sincere desire within themselves to change. So what I like to do is create and cultivate a space where they feel comfortable and safe enough to open up to themselves, to open up to me, to open up to our kind of collective connection with the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, and facilitate that change in ourselves. I feel like we all innately have healing power. We have that innate intelligence that lets us make ourselves better. And if we are open to that, amazing things can happen and amazing things can shift. And when people tell me, oh my God, you healed me with this or you helped me with that, I didn't do anything. I only made the space for them to do it for themselves.
It's a pretty big thing. Do you do that for yourself? Do you self-heal or do you go to healers?
I'm pretty bad about self-healing. I think it's like psychics. I know. And yeah, I'm not great at it. And I think it's like the cobbler's son has no shoes. You're so focused on the outward that you sort of neglect the inward. But I'm lucky enough to have sort of my own group of healers that I can go to when I need help. I have family. I have an amazing partner that helps me kind of take care of myself when I am down and out.
So you do heal yourself. You just use other healers.
To use my logic, yes.
They are creating, so you do indeed.
Yes.
Turning it around on you, that's my gotcha question. One last question, because I think we have it's a worldwide epidemic, and I'm interested to hear from someone who works in a more etheric realm, magical realm. Do you ever feel depressed, bored, and how do you, if you do, how do you kind of lift yourself up and out?
Ooh. Well, I'll answer the easy part first. I never feel bored.
Okay.
I grew up an only child, and so I think
you learned
there's so much to entertain myself. There's so much I'm curious about.
Yeah. Well, there's TV.
Oh, that's another episode.
Yeah.
But yes, I definitely feel depressed. I think when I started sincerely kind of on my own spiritual path, I was experiencing tremendous results. My intuition was increasing. My sensitivity to the world was increasing. And I went on at full force thinking, oh my gosh, at this rate, I'm going to be a super psychic. Maybe I can levitate. Like, who knows what could happen?
So fun and exciting, right? Yeah.
And then I had teachers that warned me, and they said, this isn't all, fairies and unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah.
And we're walking down this path, you encounter your shadow. You encounter things that are scary. You encounter things that terrify you about yourself, and you also encounter doubt of am I going crazy? Do I need to have a CAT scan? So there's experience of the high highs and I think the low lows. And one of my practices I've been working with a lot lately in my meditation practice is that concept of non-attachment. To know, yes, I can experience these lows and these depressions, these valleys, but to also know that the peaks will come. And to have faith that in sort of this concept of equanimity, that both will happen and that both are okay, and we can be students and we can learn from both.
I think that's true. I think that's definitely a practice of non-attachment, and it's pretty easy to get attached to feeling despair.
And when you're in it, you don't want someone to tell you, oh, you know what, it's equanimity, babe. You want to be like, you know what, no.
When you're in it, you don't want anyone to tell you some kind of bullshit, easy answer.
Exactly, but...
oh, just wake up tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah, but there is that sense of another healer I interviewed in South Africa. She mentioned that she not relishes, but she honors those times where she has to take to bed for like a day and a half, because that reveals her something new is revealed to her.
Certainly.
A follow-up question to that. I know it's a final question. You said that you see things that scare you. What have you seen? What's scary to you in this kind of wild and magical world? Liminal worlds.
My liminal worlds. You know what's interesting? I grew up as the daughter of a cop. And in a whole cop family, so everything to us is an outside threat. It's like beware, arm yourself of what out here could. And as a result, I also grew up very protected and sheltered because my family saw things that I would. They hoped that I would never see. So I think I grew up with this: what's out here? What could harm me? What could hurt me? And as I deepen this practice, the scariest things I find are inside myself. The demons that are in the closet are really the demons that are inside me. And the things that are scary, is my own potential and my own lack of potential. And the things that scare me most are what I find inside, which is exciting to explore and terrifying. But I think it also removes
Right.
blame, also, to externalize some of those
That's
scary things.
I can't blame someone.
I know, it's so much easier, right?
I get it.
And I'm not perfect at it, because,
Right.
I mean, I will wag a finger until
Yeah.
it gets cold, but I think the scariest things are the demons that I find inside myself. I think we're all capable of immense love, immense healing, and also great darkness, and it just depends on which ones we feed and give energy to.
Right. Do you think that everyone has the capacity to feel better and grow in the way that you are?
Absolutely. I absolutely think so. It's been my singular obsession for, I mean, since I was old enough to have an obsession. So I think in that way, I spend a lot of my time focusing on it, but I don't think everybody has to spend all of that time. I think they just have to have a willingness and a curiosity to begin exploring, and a desire to make more for themselves outside of what they started with.
These worlds are available to all of us.
All of us, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
I look forward to more of these talks with
Likewise.
you, if you're open.